Whispers in the shadows. The rain fell in sheets across the concrete, turning the city into a watercolor painting of blurred lights and shadow. Naomi Bennett hurried down the sidewalk, cursing her decision to work late. Her phone battery had died hours ago, leaving her unable to call for a ride, and the usual bustling streets of Portland had emptied as the storm intensified. A crash of thunder made her jump, and she clutched her bag tighter. 3 more blocks to the bus stop. 2 more. After that to her apartment. She could make it. The footsteps behind her had been following for 2 blocks now. Steady, unhurried, unconcerned by the downpour. When she slowed, they slowed. When she quickened her pace, they matched it. Naomi's heart hammered against her ribs as she turned. Down Hawthorne Street, a shortcut she rarely took even in daylight. The footsteps followed. Closer now. She reached for her keys, threading them between her fingers like makeshift brass knuckles, a trick her college roommate had taught her. The alley loomed ahead, a narrow passage between buildings that would cut her journey in half. Safety versus speed. She chose speed. The moment she entered the alley, hands grabbed her from the shadows. "Give me your bag," a voice hissed, alcohol sour, breath hot against her face. Before she could scream, the man behind her, the one with the footsteps, spoke. "Let her go." His voice was calm but carried steel beneath the surface. The attacker spun, dragging Naomi with him. "Back off, man. This ain't your business." "I'm making it my business." The stranger stepped forward, his face illuminated briefly by a flash of lightning. He was tall with broad shoulders, dark hair plastered to his forehead by the rain. His eyes never left the attacker's face. What happened next blurred in Naomi's memory. A flurry of movement, a grunt of pain, her attacker suddenly on the ground, and the stranger pulling her away, his hand gentle but firm on her elbow. "Are you hurt?" he asked, voice softer now as they emerged onto the main street. Naomi shook her head, adrenaline making her fingers tremble. "No, thank you." "Julian Reeves," he said simply, offering a hand. "Naomi Bennett." Her voice sounded distant to her own ears. "Let me walk you home, Naomi Bennett, or wherever you're going." There was something in his eyes, a recognition or perhaps concern, that made her hesitate. "The bus stop is just there," she pointed. "But I missed the last one." Julian nodded. "I have a car. Let me drive you home." Common sense told her not to get into cars with strangers, even ones who'd just saved her from being mugged. But something about Julian felt familiar, like a forgotten dream resurfacing. "I can call you a rideshare," he offered, noting her hesitation. "No, it's fine. Thank you." She surprised herself with the words, "If you don't mind." In his car, a modest sedan with clean interiors, Julian turned up the heat and handed her a clean handkerchief for her rain-soaked face. "Where to?" She gave him her address, watching his profile as he drove. "Do you make a habit of rescuing women in alleys, Julian?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Only on Tuesdays." It was, in fact, a Tuesday. "Are you new to Portland?" she asked. "Returning, actually. I grew up here, moved away for work. Now I'm back." "What kind of work?" "Security consultant. Before that, police detective." That explained his confidence in the alley. "Well, thank you again. Most people would have walked by." Julian's knuckles whitened slightly on the steering wheel. "I'm not most people." When they reached her apartment building, he insisted on walking her to her door. At the threshold, Naomi found herself reluctant to say goodbye. "Would you like to come in for coffee? As a thank you?" The invitation surprised her as much as it seemed to surprise him. Julian hesitated, conflict evident in his expression. "Another time, perhaps?" He reached into his pocket and handed her a business card. "In case you need anything." As she watched him walk away, Naomi couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't coincidence, that Julian Reeves had been exactly where she needed him, exactly when she needed him. And somehow, she knew she would see him again. Paper trails and memories. 3 days after the incident in the alley, Naomi found herself staring at Julian's business card. Rain tapped against her office window as she turned the simple white rectangle in her fingers. Julian Reeves, Security. Consultant with a phone number. Nothing else. No company name, no email, just 10 digits that could reconnect her to the man who'd appeared like a guardian angel in the storm. Before she could talk herself out of it, she dialed. "Reeves," he answered on the second ring, his voice exactly as she remembered. "It's Naomi. Naomi Bennett." "From Tuesday night?" A pause. "I remember." Something in his tone suggested he'd been waiting for her call. They met for coffee that afternoon, at a small cafe tucked between a bookstore and a vintage record shop. Julian arrived early, securing a corner table with views of both entrances. He stood when she approached, a gentleman's gesture that seemed both natural and practiced. "No more late nights at work?" he asked as she settled across from him. Naomi tilted her head. "I never mentioned I was working late." A flicker of something, discomfort, crossed his face. "You were dressed professionally. I assumed." She let it pass. "I'm a social worker with the county. Sometimes the paperwork keeps me later than I'd like." "Helping people suits you," he said with a certainty that felt strangely intimate. Over lattes and shared pieces of lemon cake, Naomi learned that Julian had spent 12 years with the Portland Police Department before transitioning to private security. He'd traveled extensively, Chicago, Philadelphia, even a stint in London, before returning to Portland 6 months ago. "Why come back?" she asked. Julian's eyes, a deep amber in the cafe's warm lighting, met hers. Unfinished business. She found herself sharing too, about her childhood bouncing between foster homes after losing her parents in what the newspapers had called a suspicious fire at the Golden Pines Children's Home. About her determination to become a social worker to help children like herself. About her passion for painting, though she rarely found time for it anymore. Julian listened with an intensity that made her feel simultaneously exposed and understood. When her hand trembled slightly recounting the fire, he reached across the table, his fingers warm against hers. "You survived," he said softly. "That matters." Coffee extended to dinner 2 nights later. Dinner led to a Sunday afternoon walk through Washington Park, where autumn had painted the trees in brilliant oranges and reds. Julian seemed to savor the simplicity of these moments, as though ordinary pleasures were somehow new to him. During their 3rd week of knowing each other, Naomi invited Julian to her apartment for dinner. She cooked her specialty, a pasta dish her 3rd foster mother had taught her, while Julian opened wine and moved around her kitchen with unexpected familiarity. "You seem comfortable here," she observed, watching him locate utensils without asking. "Most kitchens follow the same logic," he replied, but his eyes didn't quite meet hers. After dinner, they settled on her sofa, the space between them shrinking as the evening progressed. When Julian finally kissed her, it felt both inevitable and surprising, like recognizing a place you've only seen in dreams. Later, as they lay tangled in her sheets, Julian traced the small, crescent-shaped scar behind her ear, a relic from the fire she barely remembered. "You're safe now," he whispered, and something in his voice made it sound like a promise he'd made before. In the weeks that followed, Julian became a fixture in her life. He fixed the leaky faucet in her bathroom, recommended books that seemed perfectly tailored to her taste, and listened to her frustrations about difficult cases at work. He moved through her world with careful attention, as though memorizing every detail. If sometimes she caught him watching her with an expression that bordered on sorrow, she attributed it to his naturally protective nature. if occasionally he seemed to know things about her she hadn't shared. Her allergies, her preference for sleeping with the window cracked, her childhood fear of thunder. She explained it away as intuition. Love, after all, had its own logic. The hidden dossier. 2 months into their relationship, Naomi woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Julian humming in her kitchen. She stretched languidly, savoring the lingering warmth of his side of the bed, before pulling on his discarded shirt and padding barefoot down the hall. Julian stood at the stove, his back to her, making what smelled like cinnamon pancakes. His worn leather messenger bag rested on one of the kitchen chairs, partially open. As she moved to embrace him from behind, her hip bumped the chair, sending the bag toppling to the floor. "Sorry," she laughed, bending to collect the scattered contents, a notebook, his keys, a pen, and a worn manila folder that had slid partially under the table. Julian turned quickly. "I've got it," he said, but Naomi had already retrieved the folder. Her name, written in careful block letters across the tab, stopped her cold. "Why do you have a folder with my name on it?" She meant the question to sound casual, even teasing, but her voice emerged thin and strained. Julian set down the spatula, his expression shifting to something guarded. "Naomi, what is this?" She opened the folder before he could stop her. Inside lay the fragments of a life she thought only she remembered. A newspaper clipping about the Golden Pines fire with her 7-year-old face circled in red among the survivors. A photocopy of her original birth certificate. A social services report detailing her placement in her first foster home. Photos of her as a teenager, walking across her high school campus, unaware of being watched. Notes in Julian's handwriting, tracking her movements, her relationships, her job applications. And most disturbing of all, a photograph of her apartment building with her window marked with an X, dated 6 months ago, before they'd ever met. Naomi's. Hands shook as she looked up at Julian, whose face had gone pale. "You've been stalking me." "No." He took a step toward her, stopping when she flinched back. "It's not what you think. You've been watching me for years." She flipped through more. Pages, surveillance notes, addresses, even medical records. "My God, were you ever going to tell me? Was any of this real?" Julian's composure cracked. "All of it was real. Is real. Please, let me explain." "Explain what? That you engineered our meeting? That attack in the alley, was that staged too?" "No. I would never put you in danger. I saw an opportunity to make contact when I recognized that man following you. I'd been trying to find the right moment." "The right moment to what? To pretend you hadn't been spying on me since I was a child?" Her voice rose with each word, panic and betrayal fueling her anger. Julian ran a hand through his hair, desperation evident in his movements. "Please sit down. There are things you don't know, things I've been trying to protect you from." "Protect? Me?" Naomi clutched the folder to her chest. "You invaded my privacy, my life. You made me fall in love with you under false pretenses." "The feelings are real," Julian insisted. "Everything between us is real." "How can I believe that? How can I believe anything you say now?" She moved toward the door, grabbing her keys from the counter. Julian stepped forward, his hand outstretched. "Where are you going?" "Away from you." She slipped on her shoes, still wearing only his shirt and a pair of leggings she'd grabbed from the laundry basket. "Don't follow me. Naomi, please. It's not safe for you to be alone right now." She paused at the door, the folder still clutched in her trembling hands. "Why? Who exactly are you, Julian? What do you want from me?" His expression darkened with what looked like genuine fear. "I never wanted anything from you. I only wanted to keep you safe." "Safe from what?" Julian's answer chilled her to the bone. "From the person who really started the fire at Golden Pines, the person who's been hunting the survivors for 20 years, the person who's still looking for you." unraveled threads. Naomi sat rigid on a park bench 3 blocks from her apartment, the manila folder open on her lap. Around her, families enjoyed the autumn afternoon, oblivious to her world collapsing. She flipped to the last page in the folder. A police report Julian had apparently accessed illegally. The Golden Pines fire had been ruled accidental at the time, but Julian's notes in the margin told a different story. Accelerant pattern inconsistent with electrical fire. Targeted. Her phone buzzed for the 9th time. Julian again. She silenced it without answering. The next page showed a list of names. Children from Golden Pines. Most had been crossed out, with dates beside them. With growing horror, Naomi realized they weren't just crossed out, they were dead. Car accidents, drownings, home invasions, suicides that didn't quite add up. 17 names spanning 20 years, each death ruled accidental or self-inflicted. Only 3 names remained uncrossed. Her own, someone named Fletcher Donahue, and a third, Bethany Wilson. The bubble of her carefully constructed life had burst, revealing something dark and terrifying beneath. She closed the folder, unable to look any longer. Julian had violated her trust, invaded her privacy, manipulated their meeting, but was he telling the truth about the danger? By sunset, exhaustion and cold drove her back to her apartment. She half expected to find Julian waiting, but the place was empty. Her phone showed 23 missed calls and a text. "Please let me know you're safe. I'll explain everything. When you're ready." "I'm sorry." She double-locked her door and collapsed onto her sofa, emotionally drained. Sleep claimed her despite her racing thoughts. A knock at her door jolted her awake hours later. Midnight. Her living room was dark, save for the glow of streetlights through the blinds. "Naomi." Julian's voice, urgent but quiet. "Please let me in. I need to know you're all right." She approached the door cautiously. "Go away, Julian." "I can't do that." His voice dropped lower. "Someone accessed the Golden Pines survivor database today. They know I've been tracking you. They might know where you are." Fear prickled along her spine. "How convenient. Check your email. I sent you proof. Records of the database breach. Please, Naomi. 5 minutes." Against her better judgment, she opened the door, leaving the chain, engaged. Julian looked terrible, hair disheveled, eyes rimmed with shadows, still wearing the same clothes from morning. 5 minutes, she said, removing the chain. Once inside, Julian moved efficiently, checking locks, glancing out windows, before sitting across from her at the kitchen table. Between them, he placed a new folder, thicker than the one she'd found. 23 years ago, a man named Vincent Hargrove lost custody of his daughter to the foster system after his wife's death revealed his abuse. He swore to get her back. But when the courts terminated his parental rights, something in him broke. Julian opened the folder, revealing a mugshot of a hollow-faced man with cold eyes. He blamed the system, the judge, the social workers, everyone involved in separating him from his daughter. What does this have to do with Golden Pines? His daughter, Elise, was placed at Golden Pines temporarily. When Hargrove found out, he saw an opportunity. If he couldn't have her, no one would. He set the fire intending to kill her and everyone responsible for taking her away. Naomi's stomach twisted. But she survived? Julian shook his head. Elise died in the fire, but Hargrove didn't know that at first. By the time he learned the truth, he'd convinced himself that all foster children were corrupted by the system that had taken his daughter. He began hunting the survivors, methodically, patiently eliminating them one by one. If that's true, why didn't you go to the police? I was the police, Naomi. For 12 years I tried to build a case against him. But Hargrove is clever. Each death seemed accidental. Different jurisdictions, different methods, years apart. No one saw the pattern except me. How did you find it? I was a rookie when the Wilkins boy died, supposedly drowned at a summer camp. Something felt wrong. I started digging, found connections to other deaths. By the time I had enough to convince my superiors, Hargrove had disappeared. Julian leaned forward, his eyes intense. I left the force to hunt him full-time. I've been tracking the remaining survivors, warning them, helping them disappear. Fletcher is safe in Australia with a new identity. Bethany went underground in Canada. And me? Naomi's voice caught. Why didn't you just warn me like the others? Julian's expression softened with something like shame. I tried 3 years ago. You were still in grad school. I approached you, told you everything, but you thought I was crazy. You threatened to file a restraining order. Naomi frowned, trying to remember. I don't recall any of that. You wouldn't. 2 days after I warned you, you were in a car accident. Concussion, short-term memory loss. I thought Hargrove had found you, that he'd made his attempt. After that, I decided to stay close, to watch over you until I could eliminate the threat permanently. And falling in love with me? Was that part of your protection plan? Pain flashed across Julian's face. No, that was the mistake I never saw coming. He reached across the table, not quite touching her. I didn't mean for any of this to happen, Naomi. I just wanted to keep you safe. The silence between them stretched, filled with the weight of revelations and betrayal, and something else. The uncomfortable recognition that despite everything, what had grown between them felt undeniably real. Finally, Naomi spoke. If what you're saying is true, what happens now? Where fate and choice converged, dawn broke over Portland as Naomi and Julian finalized their plan. They'd been up all night, Julian explaining, Naomi questioning, both of them navigating the fragile new reality between them. Trust, once shattered, couldn't be instantly restored, but the immediate danger demanded cooperation. Hargrove will make his move soon, Julian said, spreading a map across her kitchen table. He follows patterns, always approaches when his targets are alone, vulnerable. The accident 3 years ago wasn't his end game. It was reconnaissance. Naomi rubbed her temples, processing. So we draw him out? We make him think you're isolated, that I've abandoned you after being exposed. Julian circled a location on the map, a cabin on the Oregon coast. I've used this safe house before, remote but defensible. And if he doesn't take the bait? Julian's expression hardened. He will. He's waited 20 years to finish what he started. You're one of the last connections to his daughter, to his failure. Naomi studied the man across from her, this stranger she'd fallen in love with, this protector with his web of secrets. In the harsh morning light, she could see the toll his mission had taken. The premature lines around his eyes, the hypervigilance in his posture, the haunted look of someone who'd witnessed too much tragedy. Why did you stay? She asked suddenly. After I found the folder, you could have disappeared, moved on to protecting someone else. Julian looked up, surprise flickering across his face. Because it stopped being about protection a long time ago, Naomi. Somewhere between our third coffee and the night you told me about your painting, this became about you, not the case, not the mission. Just you. Something unfurled in her chest, not forgiveness, not yet, but understanding. They left for the coastal cabin that afternoon, staging a visible argument in front of her apartment for any watching eyes. Julian drove separately, taking a circuitous route while Naomi headed directly to the coast, apparently alone and vulnerable. The cabin sat on a bluff overlooking the Pacific, surrounded by wind-twisted pines. Inside, Julian had prepared meticulously, security systems, emergency supplies, multiple escape routes. They settled into an uneasy coexistence, waiting. On the third day, while scanning the perimeter cameras, Julian froze. Vehicle approaching, not local. Naomi's pulse quickened as she peered at the screen. A nondescript sedan moved slowly up the access road, stopping just out of direct sight of the cabin. Is it him? Julian studied the grainy image. Can't tell. Stay inside, away from windows. Hours passed in tense silence. Night fell, bringing with it a coastal storm that lashed rain against the windows and threw tree shadows across the walls. Just after midnight, the power cut out. Backup generator. Julian began, but the expected hum never came. He's disabled it. Stay here. Julian, please. His eyes found hers in the darkness. I can't lose you. Not now. He disappeared into the shadows of the cabin, moving with practiced stealth. Naomi pressed herself against the wall beside the bedroom door, listening to the storm rage outside and the blood pound in her ears. A crash from the kitchen, a muffled shout, the sound of struggle. Ignoring Julian's instructions, Naomi moved through the darkened hallway, guided by flashes of lightning through the windows. In the kitchen, two figures grappled, Julian and a leaner, older man with wild eyes that caught the light like an animal's. You can't save her, the man, Hargrove, hissed. She's corrupted, just like all the others, just like Elise became. Julian slammed him against the counter. Your daughter wasn't corrupted. She was trying to escape you. Hargrove's hand closed around a knife from the dish rack. You don't know anything about my daughter. The blade arced toward Julian's throat. Without thinking, Naomi lunged forward, grabbing a cast-iron pan from the stove and swinging it with all her strength. It connected with Hargrove's temple with a sickening crack, sending him crumpling to the floor. Julian secured him with zip ties before checking for a pulse. He's alive. Unconscious. Naomi sank to her knees, adrenaline draining away. Is it over? Yes. Julian knelt beside her, tentatively reaching for her hand. It's over. The authorities are already on their way. I triggered a silent alarm when the power was cut. Outside, the storm began to subside, the space between lightning and thunder growing longer as it moved out to sea. In that strange calm, Naomi found clarity. You lied to me, she said quietly. You manipulated your way into my life. Julian nodded, accepting the accusation. I did. But you also saved me, multiple times. I would do it again. Naomi looked at their intertwined hands, hers still trembling slightly, his steady and warm. Where do we go from here? Julian's answer was honest in its uncertainty. I don't know. I've been chasing ghosts for so long, I'm not sure I remember how to just live. Maybe, Naomi said carefully, we figure it out together, start over, with the truth this time. In the distance, sirens wailed, growing closer. Julian helped Naomi. To her feet, both of them battered, exhausted, but standing. My name is Julian Reeves, he said softly, as though introducing himself for the first time. Former detective. I've spent the last decade hunting a killer and protecting his potential victims. And somewhere along the way, I fell in love with you. Naomi took a deep breath, choosing her path. I'm Naomi Bennett, survivor, social worker, and I think, despite everything, I might be falling in love with you too. The red and blue lights of approaching vehicles began to flash through the windows, illuminating their faces in alternating colors. Whatever came next, explanations, to authorities, processing of trauma, rebuilding of trust, they would face it in the harsh light of truth, rather than the shadows of secrets. Julian squeezed her hand gently. So was it protection, or was it fate? Naomi smiled, a small but genuine expression in the darkness. Maybe both. But it's real now. And in that moment, standing amid the wreckage of secrets exposed and dangers confronted, Naomi recognized that sometimes love begins in the most imperfect ways, built on half-truths and good intentions gone awry. But its ultimate test is whether it can survive in the light of full disclosure, whether it can transform from what it was into what it needs to be. As the first officers approached the cabin, Naomi and Julian stepped forward together, ready to tell their story, all of it, this time.